Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Book Club. This is the final book club we have for The Infinite Game. Where's my copy? It's somewhere around here. The Infinite Game. So I'm a little sad. But as you all know, we added a spontaneous additional book club for Together is Better, which we're going to do on the 21st, August 21st, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. So it'll give you 2 weeks to read Together is Better. It's a lovely little book, and we can do that because, quite frankly, if I'm honest, I didn't want to stand because it's like the highlight of my week. We are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We have people coming in from around the world, really exciting. Hello, Scottsdale, Arizona. Hello, Qatar. Hello, New York. Hello, Ethiopia. India. Australia, man, you're up early in the morning. UK, Colombia, man, this always blows my mind. Arizona, Philippines. I've eaten balut. Well, I tried to, then I got a little bit grossed out and I didn't eat it. I just love how we're all here together. South Africa, West Virginia, Turkey, the Netherlands, just such a fantastic grouping of everyone. As everyone knows, book club is not about reading a book. It is about coming together and doing something with each other. So I hope you've enjoyed it and enjoyed the conversations. Thanks for sending in your questions. We're going to be going through two things today, chapters 10 and 11, of course, a little bit at the end, which is Existential Flexibility and the Courage to Lead. So I thought I would have a little special guest today. Are we good on special guests? We're good on special guests? Yes? Okay, I'm going to assume we are. I don't know. So hopefully this will work. An organization that has publicly stated that they want to be infinite-minded, which is Airbnb. The CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, a short while ago, about over a year ago, actually, he made a public announcement that he wants his company to be infinite-minded. So I thought, what an opportunity to talk to Brian and ask him how he found the courage to buck the system. So I think let's get Brian in here and have a little chat with him about courage to lead and existential flexibility.
Hey, Simon.
There he is. Brian, how are you?
How are you doing? Good to see you.
You're back to back today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes, long time to talk. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I know you guys been going through some very hard times. One thing which I don't think people realize, you're in the travel industry. Your business lost 80% of its revenue in 8 weeks, which is just astonishing. And unfortunately, you had to make some really difficult decisions and ask some people to transition away. What I love about you, and I just have to say this, is I use your company as the blueprint for other companies that are struggling on how to treat people with dignity in this hard time. You were generous with people. My favorite thing is you set up an entire website. Was it Airbnb.com/talent?
Yeah, and with 500,000 people. So yeah, we basically told employees, so I'll just to jump in, but like so many people, they think they do three things. They try to give severance, and sometimes they don't quite go as far as they could. So you got to go as far as you can. The way they communicate, they hold back. Like they either don't give them all the information, or they just kind of hold their emotions back. No one wants to see that. Like you want to know leaders have a heart because that tells you they care about you and you're going to be okay. But the last thing is we thought there's something that doesn't cost a lot of money. We can do what we can to help them get jobs. And my co-founder, Joe, had a great idea. He said, what if we took our recruiting team and we made them like equivalent of a job placement, helping people leaving. And then we took it a step further and we said, what if we allowed everyone to opt in to post their profiles so recruiters can contact them? 500,000 people eventually contacted them.
It's unbelievable. I know we were looking for some help, and we went to Airbnb.com/talent and we reached out to someone and they'd already found a job. So it was fantastic. I just love that you did it with dignity, and that's the most important thing. The thing I wanted to talk to you about was some time ago, you made a very public announcement that you wanted Airbnb to be an infinite-minded organization, which is a big deal. I've had conversations with CEOs behind the scenes where they've expressed interest, but nobody does it publicly. Yeah. All the pressures on businesses these days are to be finite-minded. from your investors, from marketplace, sometimes even internally. And you're not public now, but if you ever do, the pressure becomes even more overwhelming to be finite-minded. How did you find the courage to basically buck the system and make this public announcement of the kind of company you want to build?
I just kind of started with a couple, maybe 3 realizations. The first is the companies I admired, they were enduring companies, like, I don't know, like Apple, or Disney, or you name the company. The second is when you're a founder and you start a company, I mean, I don't have children, but it is like your baby, and the last thing you want to do is outlive your child. And the third thing is like if you have a purpose, you have to ask yourself, well, like, I guess it's okay to be finite minded if you have a purpose and that purpose you achieve. But if that purpose is an ideal that you're constantly pursuing, then at some point, if you don't keep pursuing it, it doesn't happen. And I felt like the thing that we were doing, or the thing we're trying to do, is try to, bring people together, connect them so they can feel like they belong. I just think I think that's something that people are yearning for now more than ever. And we have not even scratched the surface. And then, you and I talked, and you obviously you said what you've written in the book. And I always thought to myself, it's really weird that we cover business the way we cover sports, like who's winning, who's losing. By the way, a lot of the same people who like the stock market like sports. And so I understand why the stock market and sports, business and sports, seem similar. They're not similar at all. I mean, even this idea of competition, competition exists, but in the technology industry, one of the things we learn is that you're not all fighting for the same pie. The whole point of technology is to grow pies. That's kind of what this industry does for the most part. And so you used to tell me, like, it's not about like winning or losing. It's about being ahead or being behind. And we have the most unbelievable examples of companies that seem like they were in the brink and they're now. And so I don't actually think it didn't take a lot of courage for me. It just took logic.
Well, I appreciate that you followed that logic. I mean, I think you're underselling yourself. That logic is clear to a lot of CEOs, but they shrug their shoulders and say, it's the system, or what am I supposed to do? Or, I wish I could change it. So what I love is you're a young company with young leadership who is saying the future of business has to be different, and you're taking the lead. So I appreciate your position so much.
I don't think it's as hard as, like, it seems really scary to like kind of go out on a limb at first. But the thing is that actually like who the hell wants to cheer on companies like just like it's like driving their car at the edge of a constant cliff? Like, who wants to do that? And do we really want to live in a world of all kinds of companies? Like, I actually think there's a lot of support for an idea of a company just enduring. Like, when did that become controversial?
Yeah.
My God.
It's such a good point. After you made the announcement and you've been making the decisions to be more infinite minded, were there some things that were easier than you expected, and were there some things that were bigger challenges than you expected?
Yeah. What was easy was for everyone to say they agreed with it, because it seems like almost impossible to disagree with the concept. Like, well, if you don't agree that you want to have like a kind of infinite or enduring time horizon, you're saying, yeah, I want the music to stop. Well, who wants to say that? The hard part is actually changing how you do things.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I want to be infinite. I want to like make the world a better place. I want to do the right thing. Now let's still do these 10 things the way they've always been done.
Yeah.
And so I think what gets very, very hard is to say, change the scorecard about what success is. Because if you say something and you talk a certain way, you got to start walking that certain way.
Yeah.
So it means that, like, how you run your board meetings, like what metrics you have, who's on your board, and like the things you pursue, like they all have to change. And the moment you start changing mechanisms, that's when you start to really feel you start to feel that, right? When it's the tangible actions.
Yeah. One of the other things,
people actually agree with you, not when you say something, but when you try to do something.
Right. That ain't that the truth. Also, when COVID hit, we're talking about existential flexibility this week. A lot of organizations were forced to pivot, and some struggled. They were just grasping for straws, double downing on their old business models, and they put themselves at the center of the equation. How are we going to survive? How are we going to make more money? Those are the companies that struggle to pivot. Airbnb pivoted reasonably quickly, producing these live online experiences. Can you sort of walk us through sort of how that decision was made? I assume you fell back on your just cause. You fell back on that ideal that you have, and you just found a new way to do it. Just talk about how it happened and how quickly it happened.
Well, first of all, it starts with knowing what business you're in, and we didn't start this company to be a travel company. We didn't start this company to get into real estate. Joanna and I started this company because we're deeply passionate about connecting people and belonging. And so when you do that, you say, well, there's many ways to connect. You think we invented all the ways that people can connect? Of course we hadn't. So you start with that. The second thing you do is you just have to have a mindset. Andy Grove, one of the founders of Intel, and he said, bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. I wanted us to be that third bucket. And you know what? So much of it's mindset. If you think you're going to win, if you think that this is going to define you in a positive way and you're going to learn something from it and it's going to make you stronger, it kind of happens, right? Like so much of your mindset of the leader becomes the psychology of the organization. And that psychology really becomes a collective consciousness that, man, it becomes real. Mm-hmm. And so that was the thing. And we said every single opportunity is a moment we have to pivot, move fast. So what actually happened was, first of all, you have to have a mindset of hope, of optimism, of resiliency that we're going to get through this. And not only are we going to get through this, but every one of these crises is going to lead to a new point of innovation. Let's look for moments. Mm-hmm. And a moment happened. We, with social distancing, we had to shut down in-person experiences. Airbnb's known for homes, but we also have 3-hour activities that you can book with people all over the world, do really cool activities. They got paused. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, we started doing listening sessions with our host. It's important, by the way, to listen and be curious. And some of I don't think it's much in life you have to have ideas as much as be a receiver for ideas. Mm. Like, it's not my job to have an idea, and it's not our job for any of us to have an ideas. I think we have to be receivers. We're like radio antennas. Like, we just got to get on the right signal, and they'll tell you, people will tell you things. Mm. And people told us they want a host, but they can't do it in person. Can they offer them online? Mm. And at first I thought to myself, no, you can't offer them online. We're about connection and connections in the real world. Then I thought to myself, well, if that's the case, there's not going to be a lot of connection anytime soon. Right. So we quickly realized, yeah, we should get in on this. And within 14 days, we pivoted the entire product line to offer online experiences. So now we have 800 experiences, 200 Olympians. So we did a 9-year partnership with the Olympics, 200 Olympians, including Jackie Joyner-Kersee, you may remember from 1988 Olympics. And then we had Tony Hawk did an experience. So they did these like activities, and you actually can meet them and go on kind of remotely be on experience with them. And so we did that. But I think so much of it as turning on a dime. I never wanted to just be focused on survival. If you focus on survival, that's probably all you're going to get. And so I said, I don't want to focus on survival. And so while all these other companies I saw were like kind of, like just shuttering their businesses and just in defensive mode and preservation mode, I think preservation mode is a very dangerous place to be. And I think the more resources a company accumulates, the more they start worrying about losing things. Like a parent with an overactive amygdala worrying if the child is going to and putting the helmet on the child before they go outside. You're worried something's going to happen. And at some point, they never live their life. Right. Like, you gotta the same thing with a company. You gotta be concerned, but not so concerned that you protect the company from itself and you're afraid to do anything and you're just preserving resources. And actually that's the worst possible thing, ironically, for shareholders. Right. Shareholders need the company to grow. Right. And so this weird obsession sometimes that some people have with serving shareholders, it's not in the shareholders' best interest. They need companies to create value, and therefore they need to be focused on doing new things people love. That's what needs to happen to create value.
I love it. Brian, I know your day is back to back today. I am so grateful that you took time to stop in with us and show us what courage to lead and what existential flexibility looks like in the real world. Such a pleasure, such an honor. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Simon.
Well, that was a treat for me. I got to tell you, to somebody working at the scale of Airbnb, to hear what goes through his mind and how he thinks about his business, you understand that existential flexibility and I wrote about it, but what fun to hear it. And by the way, I didn't know what he was going to say. But so much fun to hear that when we talk about existential flexibility, for the leader who makes that existential flex, they actually think the risk is not flexing. He actually said it wasn't that hard. For the rest of the world who's afraid to make those flexes, it seems crazy. But for the leader that actually makes that flex, they actually see the greater risk in not blowing things up. They see the greater risk in not flexing. And I so appreciate even his statement of courage. I think he's humble about it. But how he resorted to listening. And we've talked about that a few times throughout this book, which is, you don't have to, if you're the leader, you don't have to have all the ideas. And I think too many leaders think that they have to solve all the problems, and they didn't. They didn't actually come up with the basis of the idea of these live online experiences. They thought it wasn't possible. You heard him say it. When the host came and said, we want to do this, he said, well, you can't. It's impossible. But what they did was they listened. They heard what people wanted to do, and they simply pivoted their business to provide that platform. My expectation, what I expect to happen, I don't know this, I haven't talked to Brian about it, but what I expect will happen, which is once we go back to somewhat of a normal world where we can travel again, that Airbnb will probably have a blended business. They'll probably have both. I don't think this will be something they abandon. And I think that's the sign of a good existential flex, that you're not doing it to simply put a Band-Aid on the times, but rather you found a new way to market and a new way to spread value. We've certainly gone through this ourselves. We couldn't rely on live events anymore. We now have our live online classes, and I can guarantee you it's here to stay. We think it's actually a wonderful way to spread the message. So very grateful to Brian. Thank you very, very much for joining us. That was really wonderful. Let's take some questions from the outside world, from everywhere. Ohio has one. Here's one from Rubik's. Rubik's asked me, what happened to the open playbook? Man, you've been following my stuff for a long time. Thank you, Rubik's. Back in the early days when I was first experimenting and talking about the infinite game and the principles of the infinite game and developing an infinite mindset, I used to talk about having an open playbook. But as many of you who follow my work may know, I do all my thinking out loud. So if you go back and look at early versions of everything, you'll see me trying to work through the ideas and work out the ideas. And sometimes I develop and they grow and change. And so I realized open playbook was actually not quite accurate. It wasn't just this open-mindedness. And that's when I changed the term and somewhat of the definition of an open playbook to existential flexibility. I think it's because it was more profound and more robust than what I was tinkering with open playbook. But Rubik's, gold star for catching that. I absolutely love that. Hello, Saudi Arabia, Scotland, Montevideo, amazing, Iran. Lovely to see you all. Okay, let's do some more questions. We have a question here from Get Your Flex on Book Club. Love it, from Nancy Bertulli. How do we know when it is time to make an existential flex? And how do we find the courage to bet the farm? So how do you know when it's time to make an existential flex? So existential flexes happen when there's political changes, technological changes, cultural changes, and we realize that our business and whatever we're selling, whatever we're offering, sometimes our culture, is actually, if we follow out the logic, not viable. And you read about the example of Kodak, the invention of the digital camera. The engineer who developed the digital camera, who invented the digital camera for Kodak back in the mid-1970s, that's how old that technology is. He said, in 10 or 20 years, there'll be no film cameras. You can just follow the logic. And it was the senior leadership who chose to put blinders on. And so any customer-focused, vision-focused, just cause-focused leader, it's kind of obvious, quite frankly. It was, if you go back to the example I gave of Steve Jobs and Apple pivoting to the graphic user interface, an organization that's obsessed with making things simple to use for a customer, the technology is out of the bag. They didn't invent it, but you could follow the logic that that this thing is easier and better than having to learn an entire computer language to use a personal computer. And so why not be on the front of the wave rather than the back of the wave? So I think if you have a good, just cause, if you have a clear sense of vision of where you want the organization to go and what you're trying to advance, I wish I could give you a better answer. It's kind of obvious, and you have discussions with your people in your company, and it's kind of obvious to everybody because we're all focused on the vision. And then so when you find the courage, you sort of turn around to the people to the left of you and turn to the right of you. Like, we're going to have to do this. Yeah, I know we're going to have to do this. It's going to hurt us in the short term. Yeah, I know it's going to hurt us in the short term. Do you think we should do this? Yeah, I think we should do this. And you do it. The courage comes from checking with the people to the left and checking with the people to the right. And everybody goes, this is way more exciting. And what you often find is that when the change is made, it's kind of like jumping off a high dive. Right? The hard part isn't the falling into the water. The hard part is just the initial little leap of faith, a little jump. So once the decision's made, actually the excitement kicks in. And that's sort of a remarkable thing. You would think it would be fear, but it's actually not. Once somebody makes the decision, the excitement kicks in. That's definitely been the case at Airbnb. Once they made the decision, the excitement went up from internal and from hosts. Good question. Sarah Hembry, how are you? From Tallahassee, Florida. She asks, our book club is primarily middle and high school teachers, along with parents and community members, Education, the epitome of what could be the infinite game, is a pivotal moment right now. Yes, it is. If small pockets of schools and leaders take the chance to shift the idea of purpose of education, can their existential flex impact the larger national system which focuses more on finite goals? Amen, amen, amen. It was just what Brian said. He was quoting Andy Grove, the founder of Intel, which is, for bad companies, a crisis will destroy them. I don't remember the exact quote. For good companies, something else. And for great companies, they'll reinvent. And I think never let a good crisis go to waste. And one of the things that I think is forced education to do in this crisis is look at how it teaches. Of course, education is an infinite game. School is finite, but education should last our entire lives. I would hate to think that people think their learning is done when they graduate high school or college. And I think it's forced. It's kind of like what happened when the internet showed up in publishing or in movies, which is it forces you to look inward and say, what actually do we do? And how do we do it? And I think that schools have mixed bag in whether they've really properly embraced online, and simply transferring all the classes to online. I mean, that's not it either. But it's some sort of this blended model. And I think the more forward-thinking school districts are sitting down and saying, okay, the world has changed. We have to equip young people to be productive members of society and teach them basic skills and give them a basic education so that they can survive. Given that the world is the way it is, if we were starting a school from scratch today, if we were a startup, if we said, okay, we're starting a school from scratch, how would we build our school for this marketplace? And I think to reinvent oneself, for schools to reinvent themselves, it's an amazing opportunity. And I think because of the structure of school and the standardized tests and the short-term metrics, I think that opportunity really didn't exist in the past. It was just you couldn't do it unless you were a private school. But I think that for all schools, public, private, and otherwise, it's an amazing, amazing opportunity now to actually reimagine what education could look like into the 21st century. I hope those conversations are happening. And just like Brian explained, invite outsiders, invite students, and to reimagine what school could look like. Take information in. Doesn't mean you have to do what they say, but it means you get to take in all the new ideas, and something may spark some inspiration. I'll add one editorial piece. I think one thing that all schools should be doing and could be doing is building leadership education in for their students and leadership education in for their teachers and administrators. People go into administration, they go into leadership, and nobody teaches them how to lead. We should be teaching listening skills to students. We should be teaching effective confrontation to students. We should be teaching how to deal with stress to students. These are skills that they have to deal with in the future world, and they are not being prepared for them. I'd rather see that happen than calculus.
By the way,
speaking from a non-mathematician.
You're getting a lot of questions about what your t-shirt says. I think you have some.
Sorry, I'm getting questions about what my t-shirt is. It's a Japanese print. I like Japanese stuff. I saw it on Uniqlo. It was on sale, so I got it. Okay.
Here's a question from Ashley Van Diver.
Ashley Van Diver, yes.
How can you put these ideas into a company that isn't flexible?
How do we put these ideas into a company that isn't flexible? So the most common question I used to get was, what about these millennials? And I did a video and answered that, and that question went away, which was kind of good. The most common question that I get now, every single time, the most common question is, what if I believe in the infinite mindset and senior leadership is so finite-minded? What do I do? Well, if we adjust to an infinite mindset, we accept that we can't change people, right? We can only change our own behavior. We can't force senior leadership to change, especially if we have no direct contact with them. But we can choose to become the leaders we wish we had, right? So the whole idea is to work within the system you've got, of course, but to say, okay, we're going to build an infinite-minded team. And so amongst the people you work with, and it doesn't matter if you're in a leadership position or not, remember, leadership has nothing to do with rank. Leadership is the responsibility to take care of those around us. So you can take care of your boss too. Hey, boss, you okay during this COVID? How are you? And start embracing those practices. If the organization doesn't have a good just cause, tell your team what your just cause is and say why you love this job and how this job is helping you advance your just cause. Start building trusting teams. Start making the people you work with feel like someone has their back, that someone cares about them as human beings, that you create a space where they can be open and honest without judgment. You study your worthy rivals so that you can be a better leader, but also ask the team, what other teams inside the company are better than we are at certain things, so that we can become an even better team. Not because we want to beat them, but because we want to improve. Build that sense of constant improvement into the team. Be willing to change certain things. Very often companies do things because that's the way they've always been done, but nobody's ever asked, does it have to be done this way? And nobody ever asks, can I change it? And very often the answer is, we don't know why it's done this way, and yes, you can change it. Ask the questions. I tell you one quick funny story as a side about asking questions. Long ago when I had a job, I worked at a large ad agency, and it was a fairly common experience where my boss would come into my office and say, the client wants this by Wednesday, get it done. I'd be like, it's impossible to get this done by Wednesday. And he would say, I don't know what to tell you. You have to the client wants it by Wednesday. So one day I called the client and I said, hey, I got this thing that you asked for. When do you need it by? Because they said you have to have it by Wednesday. And they went, no, I can have it by Friday or Monday. That's totally fine. It's because somebody said, when do you want it? They said, Wednesday? And we went, okay. And then the point is, ask a question. Sometimes we have more flexibility and more freedom than we think we do. And then what ends up happening is you build this wonderful high-performing team. If you have an open-minded group of leaders, even if they're finite-minded, they're going to look at what you're doing in your high-performing team with higher loyalty, better relationships, and they're going to say, what are you guys doing down there? And they may want to learn from you. If they're completely just in their own world and short-term metric-driven, they'll just leave you alone because you're high-performing. And eventually, some of the people will leave that group and go join other teams. They'll either move on or get promoted out, and they'll bring everything they've learned and they'll take it to those teams, and they'll build high-performing, infinite-minded teams. And eventually, the tail wags the dog. Unfortunately, we don't know how long it takes. Depends on the organization, depends on the culture, depends on the people. But the tail can wag the dog. I saw it happen with a 100,000-person organization, and it took 2 years, which I think is unbelievably quickly. And it was completely without senior leadership's help. We saw the whole organization pivot just because the people started to embrace new ideas. Sarah and Nicola, the Rath girls from Swindon. How are you? You've mentioned some small companies that have made an existential flex in response to COVID. What major companies do you think have managed it? And who are the ones who are truly playing the infinite game? I think that, we heard from Airbnb. I mean, I think that is a great example of a very large company. And even despite the fact that for very practical and unfortunate reasons, realistic reasons, survivable, literally existential reasons, they've had to ask some people to transition off. They've done it in a way that, as we talked about, with great dignity. Other big companies, I was quite impressed by Nike in the early days of COVID. They were like the first company that started redefining being at home. and talking about how we can still be athletes at home. I was pretty impressed by that. In terms of what other big companies have made a good pivot? That's a great question. Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. I will post something. I think that's a good question about big companies. The problem is that big companies, especially public companies, they struggle to pivot, and maybe one of the reasons I'm struggling to have something come to mind immediately is because it's probably few and far between. What tends to happen with large companies is they tend to knuckle down. They tend to double down on the old, or wait it out, or try and just cut expenses. I think television and movies they were a little late to the game in the pivot, but I think we're starting to see it there. They're starting to learn how to adjust. Things are becoming smaller and more efficient. They're realizing they can make things from a distance, which they never thought were possible. So I think we're starting to see a little bit of that. What's that? Okay. Moving on.
Here's one from Nate. My question is, how do you manage employee motivation during this period?
Somebody asked me about, sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Okay. Somebody asked me about Netflix. I don't think Netflix pivoted. I think Netflix, their business just works really well for the time we're in. I mean, it's, I'm not sure they actually, did they really profoundly change the course of their business? I don't think so. I just think that kind of like Amazon, it's like, boy, does your business benefit from this day and age. So I think that was just good luck, quite frankly. Sorry, Sarah, what was the question?
From Amit.
From Amit, yes.
How do you manage employee motivation during this period when there's such a sense of uncertainty?
How do we manage employee motivation in such a period of uncertainty? We have to remember that we're all human beings and we're going through trauma. And so if you had a friend, I assume everybody here has at least one friend. You're in a book club, so I know you have at least one. What would you do for a friend? We have to accept that everyone will go through the trauma of COVID. Everyone. There will be no avoiding it. There will be no compartmentalizing it. Some people go through it early. Some people go through it late. Some people it will linger. Some people it will go quickly. Some people it will be recurring. But we're all going through some sort of trauma. And just to know that somebody is there to care for us. That's the most important thing. If somebody's performance is down, or you see them looking a little bit despondent or a little bit quiet on a Zoom call, on a meeting, immediately just pick up the phone when that meeting is done and be like, hey, you were a little bit quiet today. Just want to check in on you, make sure you're okay. Don't expect them to come and open up to you and all of a sudden you're going to become their therapist. And if they don't open up to you, it's fine. The most important thing is that they know that you care and they know that you're there. And just keep doing that. Motivation is going to go up and down. It has for me. It has for everybody on this call. It's going to go up and down. And, it's a delicate balance of needing to continue to give people the tools they need and help support them so they can do a good job. But if we see a little step back, that it doesn't mean that they're a problem. That means they have a problem. And so this is where good leadership, it's like good parenting. Sometimes you yell at a kid and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you sit down with them and be like, hey, what's on your mind? And it's knowing to recognize the signs and find that delicate balance. And the motivation will come and go. What we want to do is keep them inspired. The motivation will come and go. So that is normal. That's the other thing. It's normal. Nothing is abnormal here because it's a weird time. Here's one that I love. So we got a note from two book clubs that are frequent attendees and have been from the start with Y Days, the No Stress Book Club and International. And they identified each other as worthy rivals, which I really love. And what they decided to do is choose to form a partnership. They've actually joined book clubs. They've actually now coordinate together. I love that. Here's the question they asked from Ashley Freeman and Ying Pan. From the two book clubs, respectively. For those of us who work in strongly finite-minded organizations who want to take up your just cause for a more inspired and fulfilled world, what initial steps would you advise we take so that eventually the tail wags the dog? Well, we talked about this a little bit before. Commit yourself to the path of constant improvement. I think that is such an important thing. This is the funny thing. We have more freedom than we think we have. You can actually invent your own metrics. Now, they don't have to be formal metrics, but you can actually invent your own metrics. So for example, if all of the metrics inside our organization are finite and short-term, we can, within our own little team, we can create the person we all want to be more like award. And we can all write essays on who we nominate. And within our team, we can recognize the person we want to be more like. So, and we can give them a little statue and say, we all want to be more like you because you embody the values that we believe in. And we can do little things. We can create little subcultures where we're embracing all the concepts of the infinite-minded organization. So yeah, you just do it at a smaller scale. Hello, Yorkshire.
Here's a good one from Harasim. Given the current pandemic situation, how do you maintain focus on and ignore the distractions?
Given the current pandemic situation, how do we stay focused and ignore the distractions? I mean, turning off the news is probably a good idea. One of the things we have to be aware of is to try to divide your mind. I know it sounds silly, but this is what I've tried to do, which is, I try to maintain two mindsets, which is mindset one is I'm going to be informed. I want to be informed. I'm going to turn on the fire hose that is the news and everybody with an opinion. And I'm going to sort of take it in and listen to some of it, take some of it with a grain of salt, try and find middle grounds. I listen to news from both sides of the political spectrum. I want to know how it's been reported on both sides, and I sort of find something in the middle. I have my favorite news sources. I like the BBC because they're non-commercial. I like non-commercial news. And that's sort of one side. And then I have sort of what we're trying to do and advance our own cause. And that's where you remain stubbornly focused on why you're doing what you're doing, the cause that you're trying to advance, and asking ourselves our own difficult questions. The worst thing that we can do is keep changing our mind on a daily basis because the news cycle is changing or because there's new information. And this sort of whiplash creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is very unnerving for human beings. We can deal with good news. We can even deal with bad news. It's uncertainty that is just absolutely stress creating for human beings. When I don't know what's going to happen, that's where stress sets in. If something's bad, this is when we put people through known stress, like here's existential flexibility, we're going to make a flex. Everyone's like, all right, we can figure this out. Even COVID, when COVID happened, what we wanted our leaders to say was, this is bad. We're going to give you the most current information we have. We're going to keep updating it. Some of it we're going to get wrong. Some of it we're going to keep you posted. No one knows everything because this is entirely new, but we're going to try and give you as much information. Oh, and by the way, this is our long-term goal. Get people healthy, make sure that it's safe, open an economy, making sure that it's done in a responsible way. And we're going to try and do those things as quickly as we can, but we're going to keep you posted because we're not going to sacrifice either for fear of making it worse. That's all we needed. We needed somebody to tell us that we've got a long-term plan and then just keep us informed in what they know. It's the whiplash and the constant the sides fighting with each other about what's right and wrong, which is creating unbelievable uncertainty for us. We don't know who to believe or what to believe. And so what does that do? It increases stress. And so what we need at work is some sort of certainty. We need our leaders to give us some sort of vision, some sort of direction. This is our cause. Our cause has not changed. How we're going to advance our cause has changed because of COVID, but the cause itself remains fixed. We need something fixed to make us feel inspired. What else we have here? Do a few more questions. Okay, you know what I want to do? I never do this, but there were some things that I was reading in this chapter that I wanted to actually highlight because I thought they were actually kind of interesting. Right at the beginning of Existential Flexibility, page 186, if you're reading along, this is what I wrote. Existential flex does not happen at the founding of the company. It happens when the company is fully formed and functioning. To all finite-minded observe it is existential because okay, we talked about that. The point is it's not about and I even said it. It's not about the energy at a startup time. It's recreating startup energy when the organization is fully functional. And so for organizations that are successful in their existential flex, there should be a lot of excitement. Because just like a startup, why is the energy in a startup so exciting? Because we have no resources, all we have is vision, and we have each other. And that's the excitement. Well, with Existential Flex, you're recreating that kind of energy midstream, which means you need vision that outstrips your resources, and you need people who care about that vision and who are in it for the wild ride. And so there should be high morale in the middle of an existential flex. We're going through our own, and I'm watching it. It's really kind of amazing to write about something theoretically and then be in the middle of it. And as we go through ours, it's been really kind of amazing to watch the morale stay high on our team as well. I also wrote on page 200, so how do we find the courage to change our mindset? Number one, we can wait for a life-altering experience that shakes us to our core and challenges the way we see the world. Well, congratulations, we all got one. I said that was something we couldn't rely on because it was so uncertain, but literally the whole world has been shaken. And so again, amazing opportunity to change our mindset, an amazing opportunity for experimentation. Okay, let's do another question.
Here's a good one. Regarding chapter 10, X flex, how do you not blow yourself up too early or too late?
Ooh, that's such a good one. Who's that from?
It just says LinkedIn user.
LinkedIn user. Well, hello, LinkedIn user. Fan of all your work. The question was, if you're going to make an existential flex and you have the courage to make it, and you're willing to blow up the company, the question is, how do you know when to blow it up so you don't blow up too soon that you hurt yourself, but you don't wait too long that doesn't happen? I mean, there's your answer. At some point, you got to jump. You can hesitate a little bit, but at some point, you're going to jump. And quite frankly, the hardest part is just making the decision. I know from my own experience, I tend to err on being just a little slow. I don't mean months, sometimes days or weeks, because sometimes just waiting a few days, just waiting a beat, new information is revealed, sleeping on it a little bit. It should not be an impulsive decision. The realization, you can come to the realization quickly, like, oh, we're going to have to do this, but don't execute it the next day, even though you're 100% certain it has to happen. Give it a little beat, and make sure you're talking about it with the people who are going to help you do it. If you're responsible for the organization, probably other executives. Because what you want to make sure is that you covered a few bases. And like I said, you might have some new information revealed on how to do it responsibly. So yes, once you've come to the mental realization it has to be done, you don't want to wait too long. You just want to wait a couple beats. And then the hardest part is pulling the trigger. And just like anything that requires a little bit of courage, a bungee jump or jumping out of a plane with a parachute, the hardest part is the first step. And then once you've taken the leap, it's actually more exciting than you'll realize. So you're going to have to make that jump at some point, sooner rather than later. Let's take one more question. Here is Kiha Han. She's 15 years old from South Korea. Oh my God, I love it. Oh, sorry, Kia. Sorry, Kiha. He is 15 years old from South Korea. I'm your biggest fan and follower of your vision. Thank you. I have a question on behalf of my mom and my dad. Is it possible to create trust between company and employees when there are cultural and lifelong engravings of the notion companies equal villains and workers equal victims? If so, and how would the lifestyle and systems change be worked on? Okay, so good. And I think, unfortunately, this affects a lot of countries. This is a really good question, which is we now view things like government as a villain. We now view things like companies as villains, especially public companies. We talk about, whenever the add "the" in front of a term, it becomes sort of angry, like the corporations. Corporations are the corporations. It's sort of filled with anger, right? And seeing workers as victims. How do you change it? Well, how do you eat an elephant? One mouthful at a time. And what we need is those few organizations who believe that it's different, that believe that organizations have a responsibility to their people. And what you want is new narratives coming out of companies. The reason workers often see themselves as victims is because sometimes that's how they're treated. And so when they go home, they go, oh, they're beating us up again, or they're taking advantage, or they laid us off again so that the boss can protect, their bonus again, right? And we see it on the news. And we see CEOs they're having their companies doing terribly, terribly unethical things. And when forced to defend their actions, they say, we followed the law, right? Like, oh, good. I'm so proud the company I work for follows the law, even though they're highly unethical. And so what it requires is those leaders to do things differently. Airbnb is a good example. There are things that are happening differently. They're redefining what business can look like. What you're talking about, Kiha, is making a societal shift. What we're talking about is making a systemic and cultural shift. Now, the fact that the most common question I get is, I believe in the infinite mindset, but my boss doesn't, is a sign that we have too many finite-minded leaders right now leading organizations, which leads to companies being seen as villains and workers feeling like victims. But the fact that the people asking this question means this next generation of leadership wants to change it. And so we want to empower them. We want to keep it going, and it will change. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time. But we have to commit ourselves to that change. How do you get into shape? Start going to the gym and eating healthy. Is it easy? No. Does it take time? Yes. You commit yourself to the process. And that's what this whole thing is about. This whole book is about committing ourselves to a process with absolute certainty that the process works if we just stick to it. And the problem is sometimes the metrics lag, like working out, like making friends, like falling in love. Like sometimes we don't know what's going on until the person says, I love you. Or maybe we can't even see that we're getting into shape. We keep looking in the mirror and we see nothing changing in our bodies. And if we don't have those immediate reactions, we sometimes quit. And so a large part of what this book is about is committing to the process of building an infinite mindset, knowing that it is imperfect, it is human, it is messy, it is difficult, it's going to require help. That's what this is about. I have to wrap up. I don't want to wrap up. I'm having so much fun. Speaking of committing to that process, I asked the team to make a class for our online classes about what it takes to live with an infinite mindset. So they've done that. And so we have a new class that is all about what it takes to play with an infinite mindset, which I'm so proud that we built. Reading a book is one step, having conversations is another step, and anything we can do it in part to help. The class is not live yet, but if you want, you can go click and sign up and we'll send you an email when it does come live. I think we're going to put a link in the chat there. There it is. It's a complicated link, but anyway, if you go click on the link, we'll let you know when that class goes live. I'm very excited about that. And it's one of those things that we're pivoting to. We're like, how do we take the contents of a book and actually make it more actionable? So very excited about that. It's called the Infinite Game class. That's what it's called. Straight to the point. There you go. We've got a bunch of other new classes as well. Start with Why for those people who did the Jumpstart Your Why class. Hugely popular, and we decided to do two new versions of them. We're doing one especially for veterans, and we're doing one especially for healthcare professionals. We know in this crazy time in healthcare, nice for healthcare professionals to be able to reconnect with their why. And so we've been working with a trauma nurse because she's in the industry and she's been going through COVID and being a part of it. And she's been working with us to help us build this class. So if you're a healthcare professional and want to learn your why, we have a class just for you. If you're a military veteran who's transitioning and you want to learn your why, we have a class just for you. Go check it out at simonsinek.com/inspireyou. Two other new classes I'm excited about. Turn Adversity into an Advantage. Again, we're trying to produce stuff that's relevant to now, from Harvard professor Laura Huang. Also getting a lot of good feedback on that one. And then Mindful Meditation for Focused Leadership from Gianna Biscontini. Gianna Biscontini is my coach. And if you don't know what the power of meditation is to being a leader, man, let me tell you, I have a meditation practice. Gianna helps me. She's an amazing coach. And so she has mindful meditation specifically for focused leadership. What else? As always, we have a secret book club discount code. If you want to take any of our classes, just type in the discount code bookclub rules. It's bookclub rules to get 20% off any of our classes, as always. And we will be doing another one of these because I don't want to say goodbye and I don't want it to end, on August 21st, 1 p.m. Eastern. Together is better. It's available in most countries. In some countries, it has the scented page. Unfortunately, not all countries. Wasn't my choice. But there, I don't know where. Here it is. One of the pages. Here it is. If you rub it gently, it smells like optimism. And if nothing else, the smell of optimism is really nice in this day and age. So we're going to read and talk about Together is Better in a couple of weeks. I think that's about it. Just a reminder, book club has nothing to do with reading a book. It's about doing something together. I hope you keep your book clubs going. Please find another book. I can recommend a few if you like. But please continue with your book clubs. Maybe one of you will suggest something, and please keep your book clubs going and have your conversations every week, because it's really important to do things together during these times. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll see you real soon. See you in 2 weeks.